Don't think this is just another self-help podcast. It's not.
Well, what is it?
It's still a hot mess, where we ask the question, is self-help helping?
Every episode, we discuss, debate, and sometimes diss an aspect of the self-improvement movement.
We want to know, is it all too much? Has it gone too far? Is it making us even more neurotic? Is this self-help or self-help?
You make a mess of me.
That was a much needed laugh. Thank you, Fanson.
Yeah. So as I say, we are still a hot mess, and we do our best for our guests. We are talking today about microdosing.
Yeah, we are.
How are you doing over there, Susan Stewart?
So, Kelly Fanson, let's see what we're on. Day 5? Is it day 5?
Yeah, let's give our listeners
Yes.
an understanding of what's happening today. So our episode today is about microdosing. If you don't know what microdosing is, we will get in depth in this podcast, this episode, to let you know what it's all about. So stay tuned. We're going there. But just a general overview. It's a technique for studying the behavior of drugs in humans through the administration of doses so low. This is Wikipedia. They are unlikely to produce whole body effects, but high enough to allow the cellular response to be studied.
Yeah.
So we might be corrected on that today, but this is just, a Wikipedia overview of what microdosing is.
Yeah. I would say for me, my experience is very accurate to what you just said, that over the last few days, there have been small changes, but nothing not bouncing off the walls.
We should probably tell everybody that we've been microdosing to prepare for this episode for 5 days.
Yes, this has been a very needed experiment in preparation for this episode.
And we have a whole bunch to say, actually, about our experience in preparing for this particular podcast. But if there's any confusion as to what microdosing might be, I want to say what I thought it was just like taking the odd puff of a joint. Right? Like, it's like, oh, I just had a puff. I must be, microdosing. And then because I like my mezcal, which is a drink, I would, rather than shooting mezcal, which you shouldn't anyway, I would sip it, sip a little shot over the course of, let's say, an hour or whatever. And we've often joked or referred to what I'm doing as microdosing mezcal.
Yeah. And I think that if you're just kind of like taking sips throughout the day, I think that's actually called alcoholism.
I think so. And maybe I have done it throughout the day also, but that's an example of what microdosing is not.
That's not what we did for the last few days. No, we took capsules.
Yes. And we will learn more about what we took.
Yes.
And we will talk later in the podcast about the effects or the impact it's had on ourselves. But in the meantime, why we're here today is so we can speak to an expert in this field. And he's here with us today over Zoom. His name is Brian Hardy. And Brian is a holistic nutritionist, biohacker, and integrative health coach, and also hosts his own podcast called Redefining Reality. Welcome, Brian.
Yes, welcome, Brian.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I don't know how much of an expert I am, but I definitely know more than the average cat when it comes to these topics.
Buddy, I thought you were an expert. That's the only reason I've just been taking mushrooms for 5 days. I was like, because this guy knows his stuff.
Yeah, we're at least, hoping that you know about what we've been taking for the last few days. Please tell me. Do you know what we took? Yes. Do you know what was in those capsules?
We can definitely dive in and explore all those things. And it's a fascinating world. It's a world that's becoming popularized quite rapidly and shows a lot of promise for particularly mental health, which, as we all know, is strained more than ever these days, it being September 2020 and the connotations that go along with that. It's a very fascinating tool, and one more thing that people can have in their toolkit for their own self-care.
Excellent, because we talk a lot about, self-care and obviously self-help. So why, though, microdosing, it does seem to have been on the rise. Would you say it's become popularized almost? It's
Totally.
now something that you know, can have a conversation, and it wouldn't be surprising if someone was talking about microdosing, where certainly even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't think that was part of the common vernacular.
Yeah, and I think, at least from my perspective, a lot of that came through Tim Ferriss and his interview with James Fadiman. And James has been doing work in the psychedelic realm for a long time. He wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, fantastic book. And so they had a really great podcast. And Tim's had a lot of different people in the world of psychedelics and healing and, merging those two things together.
Yeah, if you don't know
Um,
Tim Ferriss, he's the author of the 4-Day Work Week, I believe.
Oh, listen to you,
4 hour.
Fanson.
And for
knowing-
hour.
4 hour.
4
yes.
hours, see, even better. And what's his podcast called? It's the Tim Ferriss.
The Tim Ferriss Show, I think.
Yeah,
Yep.
I have listened to it a few times. I like what he has to say. I don't really know what he does. Like, what's his thing?
He's done a lot. I mean, he became well known as an author and someone who taught people using the models of the 4 hour work week how to become, successful entrepreneurs at a business that could then be automated so that you could have a lot of free time. That's essentially what he got very popular.
Is it working?
For?
Is it working? Is it successful?
Or-
Are people using that and
Yeah.
succeeding?
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of people have used that model, and built their sort of core business, and then gone on to live more like nomadic lifestyles and travel more. And I think he just really helped people to see that the old way of quote unquote succeeding was kind of outdated and not aligned with actual happiness and quality of life.
It's the big pivot, isn't it?
Yeah,
The whole
and so
world,
he-
we're in a big pivot.
Yeah, I guess Tim Ferriss is all about just being like hyper efficient with your time and energy, so then you can live this more balanced life.
That's
so
a
to
big
speak.
part of it. That's
Yeah,
a big part
because
of it, for sure.
he actually transfers a lot of his studies to even like health and fitness, like the 4 hour body. I think
Yep.
it's actually now a dynasty at this point. The Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, he talks about
self-help
everything. Like,
Yes.
to be the optimal you, to be like,
Yep.
yeah,
He could be-
high performing.
He could be a little bit like Rachel Hollis at this point, where he kind of knows
I think he's beyond.
a little bit about everything.
Right, that's true.
You
That's
know,
true.
like he
She's
kind
the
of
everything girl.
has solved all the world's problems.
Yeah.
Amazing. Anyway, that's enough
Anyway,
about Tim Ferriss.
yeah.
But
Yeah. So he introduced and helped popularize the concept. And because microdosing and most things like this seem to originate in popularity on the West Coast, places like Silicon Valley and LA and California and BC, where people are
Not
more
surprising,
open to
yeah.
these things. And
I feel
where
so
people-
open.
And where people want to, like in Silicon Valley, for instance, in the digital tech startup world, where they're like, everyone's doing everything they can to have more focus and energy and creativity and all those things. It's a competitive advantage in that environment, or it can be. But so it's really interesting to see how, and most of my experience with it, and most of the people who I've spoken to about it or helped educate on the topic, are coming at it from more of a mental health perspective. Some relief from depression or anxiety, and because these specific, and we're talking about psilocybin mushrooms in this case,
And
right?
this is
So-
what we took. Yes,
yeah, and so these are the kind of
I'm going to take one right now.
quote unquote
I'm going to do a hit.
magic,
I'm gonna take one
magic
right now.
mushrooms,
Yeah.
and they have a great ability to
Do you have an extra one for me?
down. They have a bait.
We're sorry, Brian. Sorry. We're just doing drugs over here. It's fine.
I feel like it's time.
Yeah, no. We've just had a bit of a rough go here, so we're
And
just
for the
going to
daily
chill
dose.
right
So
out.
it's really just education, right? Everything I do, and any information I share online about diet, about nutrition, about any of these things, is to inform people on what things are likely to do in their system, whether it's coffee or mushrooms, and there's so many different kinds of mushrooms, or whether it's a pharmaceutical or whatever it might be, that I might be bringing in as a tool for somebody, or suggesting as a tool for someone to look into. And so microdosing, when you're talking about psilocybin, tends to be between 100 and 400 milligrams as a daily dose.
Okay.
That's a pretty good range. Now it's tricky because there's non-uniform distribution of the psychoactive constituents in a mushroom,
What?
right? So in layman's terms, there's a unequal amount of active ingredient spread throughout a mushroom.
Oh, so it's like a little surprise.
Hello.
So there's no standardization in these things. So some can be
This is
much
why people
stronger.
feel it's so risky, because you can't
Yes.
say this is what I guarantee your results to be.
Yeah, it's like anything, and this is really where medicine used to be, and why it's called a practice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is because you're experimenting and you're practicing what you know to be the best working knowledge at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't guarantee anything because everyone's biochemistry is unique. The way people respond to different things is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always going to be hyper responders. So people that have a crazy, strong response to something, and there's going to be non-responders. And most of us are somewhere in the middle.
Well, we were non-responders
The first time.
Okay, so we should tell the listeners, Brian,
we?
about our first attempt with this experiment, because we were going to do this this recording with you actually a couple months ago. So we got prepared, and so we did one capsule a day.
It was one a day for 5 days.
And so I think I speak for both of us when I say we really didn't feel really any kind of change, but we also
But maybe
did it.
we need to clarify as to why, perhaps.
Well, we were also
It was a weekend. We did it over a weekend.
We were taking them over the Canada Day weekend.
And I really like how we both said, so we'll just do the mushrooms. Like we won't drink.
Of course, we're not going to, affect this experiment with alcohol.
We even texted Brian and said, like, would it be okay if we drink? And he was
what
like,
about a little bit? What about a little bit?
Like a little.
So we drank heavily that weekend.
You went to the cottage and I went to Prince Edward County.
So
I went to like 17 wine tours.
and as they say, you can't day drink if you don't start in the morning.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, I was on a big flotational device on Georgian Bay.
Or maybe you weren't.
maybe
maybe the mushrooms were working.
So anyway,
Did it look like a unicorn?
Now that you say that. Anyway, so yeah, all I know is I was intoxicated
went
for a few
bust.
days.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But it still felt like just drinking. It didn't feel like there
No.
was anything psychedelic going on.
No.
And so my response to you as like a total hack is I was like, this is really supposed to be something that would change a chemistry or something over time. Like, I know what the hell I'm talking about, right? But I was like, I don't know if we actually should have felt anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely chilled out for the whole time, but I was also at a cottage for a long weekend, so it's probably not the best time to experiment. And Brian is nodding his head right now, saying,
We should
"Ladies,
let him say something here.
what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Going off to wine country and cottage country to measure these
I
changes.
can't let a little microdosing screw up my
God.
plans.
Still a hot mess.
Yeah. Okay, so Brian, talk to us.
Yeah. Anyway.
Do you want a
Yeah,
question
no,
or can you
it's-
just answer?
Yeah,
No,
exactly. Do you have something you'd like to ask us, Brian? No, that's silly.
It's fine. We'll just keep talking. No, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, and it's quite normal. It's quite normal for it to have that response, again, because potencies vary and people's sensitivity varies. And unless someone is suffering with severe depression or something that is like, significantly coloring, in a negative way, the way that we're thinking and feeling about our lives, you're unlikely to notice a shift unless you increase the dose, right? There's always going to be a certain dose where you notice something and then you're kind of tiptoeing on the edge of microdosing, because at that point it's beyond, it's perceivable. The changes are perceivable.
I think we both
but-
felt we were like strong enough candidates for, I'd like out of this funk. Like, I think we both kind of felt like that, but then we did exactly what we would normally do. We would self-medicate with a little booze and a little fun. And then we're like, I'm right as rain till next week, So I think we were, in terms of the process of microdosing, through your help, we were thinking we would feel that kind of difference. And in fact, so in our case, we did not, but we also fudged the whole thing.
Well, I mean, at least we stayed on brand, Fanson.
Yeah.
It was a mess. But now, of course, we have done it again.
Right. Well,
Okay, so-
we couldn't do that podcast that next day
Yeah.
or whatever. So then we were like, okay, let's reschedule. And you were like, maybe you need to double down.
You ladies are hardcore. You need something stronger.
So tell us, like, is there any sort of, I know you don't prescribe, but like, your thought was, well, then you just got to up the dose. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, because there is a certain level, and in my experience and with people that I've worked with and talked to, there's a certain level where feeling that slight shift can be really therapeutic, right? We're not talking about tripping. We're not talking about hallucinating, any of those things. We're talking about still being very much in control, very much aware of our bodies and our minds and our thoughts, but shifted in a way that creates some space and some distance from our thoughts. So we're not being, we're not wrapped up in the process of thinking, but we're more in the observer perspective, which is where a lot of meditation wants to bring us, right? And so because psilocybin down regulates.
You should listen to our meditation episode. Anyway, go ahead.
because psilocybin has been shown to down regulate something called the default mode network in the brain.
Ooh.
They think that is why it has this therapeutic effect, because the default mode network is the part of the brain that is associated with rumination and consistent, persistent thoughts, right? And those
meta
are the
feelings.
Kinds of states where if you're depressed, you're having consistent negative thoughts, right? And so because it shuts that down temporarily, it allows us to go into what I experience as a more primal, more body-centric. If you're out in nature, it's always ideal to have that surrounding, more connected to nature kind of feeling.
I mean, that's good on, any day. That's therapeutic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm quite certain that studies of forest bathing, which are literally just spending therapeutic time in the woods to de-stress, has the same effect. It has the same effect on the default mode network.
I think there's a forest in Japan that's just dedicated to forest bathing.
I believe it.
Yeah.
They prescribe it. Doctors actually prescribe that.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So cool.
Yeah, they talk about like forest deprivation or nature deprivation
Oh,
in
yeah.
our society
now. A
now.
lot of people suffering from that. Yeah.
So I'm just reflecting right now on the last few days, and I would say that like the anxiety that I usually deal with, it was at a lower level. As I'm hearing you, Brian, kind of talking about what I would say more of that activity of the left hemisphere, our judgy selves and the storyteller. I would say that like I did feel just a little bit more, like just a bit more calm, and just a bit more chilled out. I would say the very first dose that I took, I felt like I maybe had a couple sips of wine. I didn't have a couple sips of wine, by the way, but it was that little bit
reference,
of for the record, guys. Okay,
just something I know real well.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
I did dialed back the booze for this one, and it's like, okay, I do feel a little like a little bit funky. I don't know. Did you get any of that?
Yeah. So, first of all, I did not drink at all until last night. My experience was actually reflected the first experience in this way. And I wasn't sure if I was just imagining it the first time, but I'm more emotional. And like I'll cry like easier, or it'll just like happen. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, it's not like I'm crying all the time, but it's enough to note, I think, because I did sort of wonder if that had happened the first time, but I was like, I don't really feel anything else, so maybe not. And then I would say it's been again this time. Also, because I create stories and I write and I do stuff that has to like stay in my head, and I've got to like build one thought off of another, I'm finding sometimes a thought will totally escape me. Like it's just gone. Like it'll be like, phew. And I'm like, where did that go? I don't know. I'm not getting it back. And it feels a little different than my own usual absent-mindedness. Like it's kind of like, oh, I can't reconnect to that thought now.
Yeah.
Or that idea. Like it's usually just a little thing. It's not like I, forget, what I'm doing. It's just that little kernel is gone, and I can't, how sometimes you're like, give it a sec and I'll find it. Like just search the data up there, the file. But I'm like, no, it's gone.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced a similar reaction in terms of emotional fluidity.
Can I do this with an ex-boyfriend? Would I be able to eliminate all memory? No, doesn't work that way. Okay,
that's a lobotomy.
Maybe. I don't know. I've not looked into that side of things. But no, I've definitely experienced where emotions that are either, stored in the body or things we haven't really been present to, you know, things that have been sort of tucked away, to be dealt with later, can be more easily accessed. I have definitely noticed that. And I think that's part of what a lot of natural medicines do, and even some pharmaceutical medicines, depending on the category, that they seem to have an innate ability to bring those things up for, in my perspective, integration, right? And working through those things so that they're not limiting us and they're not causing, undesired behavior or repetitive patterns of destructive behavior, any of those things that we're all, familiar with. And there's a real, people will describe it as like an intelligence, and mushrooms are incredibly intelligent. And if you watch the documentary Fantastic Fungi, you'll be easily convinced of that. Highly recommend that documentary.
They could be smarter than I am.
And yeah, I mean,
Maybe.
Literally, if you really want to blow your mind, just think about human beings. We are dependent on bacteria, viruses,
Right.
funguses. We're a conglomeration of all these things. Without those things, there's no
Symbiotic.
human being. Yeah, it's mind blowing. And so there's definitely something there. And it's, mushrooms, they grow so easily. They grow all over the world. They just spring up when the conditions are right. And there's something quite mystical about that. There's something quite, intriguing about that. And the fact that the mycelium are what allow the soil and the trees and the plants to be healthy and to distribute the nutrients and to communicate, literally communicate through this webbing kind of network underneath the soil. It's like thousands of years old,
I think there's some like vegetarians who won't eat mushroom for that very reason. Am I right?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
There was a time where vegetarians were like, I actually don't include mushrooms either because they're alive. Like they're not that all food isn't, but I'm talking like 10, 20 years ago. I remember hearing that and somebody saying that. So
like more alive than a cucumber.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there was
because it has
something about the mushroom.
These, I don't know, what would you call it? Properties of.
And they would describe it as like meat. Like a mushroom.
Well,
is
you know
like,
what? That's true, right? The whatever portobello mushroom burger.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of thing. But I would say that, and now that I'm in my 40s, I do have trouble sleeping at times. Or if I get up to go to pee in the middle of the night, Brian, I don't know, you're too young for this, but then I get back into bed and now I'm wide awake. And I, of course, go into my rumination or whatever, all that brain activity. And so I did actually end up taking capsules twice at night.
Wow.
To see if I could just, quiet my mind to fall back asleep. And it worked like a charm.
Okay.
Both times.
Whoa. Because I would say I had the opposite.
Oh,
I had
really?
the opposite. Yeah. I, one day, because what I did, Brian, is, and remind me in a second. See, I have to do this. Remind me that I want to talk about what the first time I met you. Okay. I just don't want to forget.
Okay, let's type it out. Here we go.
So anyway, what was I just saying about the, no,
God.
I'm serious. I'm totally serious right now. Oh, right. So how I did it, Brian, was I had one in the morning and then I had a second one around 1:00. That's just the way I wanted to dose. I don't know why. I didn't want to take them both at once. I have no idea.
Sure.
I don't know if I thought that I was being clever. That's what I decided to do. So you can let me know if that's like, if it has any significance on anything. And then there was one day where I forgot at 1. So I took it at 6 and I was up until 2. Like I was just sitting up in bed and I never do. I fall asleep like that and I have no problem sleeping. I get up, I pee, I'm right back to sleep.
Oh, wow.
Like no problem.
Good for you.
So for sure. And I feel like I race a little bit more on them. Like I don't need caffeine.
Well, I'm not sure if you need caffeine.
I don't need
in
it
general,
generally.
But that's very interesting because
Like
I found it almost like a sedative.
Wow.
Oh,
There's
it
a
was
part
lovely.
of me though that does settle down, but then there's the other side that starts racing.
Well, anyway.
I'm a
Interesting.
duality.
Yeah, I tend to
Freak.
have a bit of the racing, and then on the other side of that is a really clear, calm kind of space.
Yeah.
But similarly, they'll keep me up. They can be quite energizing.
What's like? Is that a level up? Is that something else? What's that for?
I mean,
It's a little treat.
I've just been a little bit scared.
no reason to be scared, but a reason to be potentially excited, and that is simply because cacao
Right.
and
Here we go.
mushrooms have a really great synergy for most people.
Okay.
So because cacao can be very heart opening and energizing, and have some of those bliss, chemicals going on from the dark chocolate, that combined with, and this is true of whether it's lion's mane or cordyceps or any kind of medicinal mushroom even, right?
Glad you
There's a
brought that up.
synergy there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a synergy there. And so I found, and why I created those was after seeing my grandmother go through Alzheimer's and dementia, and see how terribly the system, they just don't have solutions, right? They don't have solutions
Yeah.
for those things. And this is way before I was into what I'm into now and doing this kind of work.
Which we're going to talk about how you got into it as well.
Yeah. And so I saw that and I thought, well, there's got to be something more natural that can be done to either prevent or help reverse these kinds of changes, because the body and the brain is very plastic, and we can regenerate tissues and we can reverse disease processes. And so I just became fascinated with, okay, what might be a good combination of things to help nourish the brain? And I knew that coconut oil was being used with some success for brain health. And that's because of the medium chain triglycerides, or MCTs, which are quite popular these days. You see MCT oil and powder.
People are
everywhere.
putting that in their coffee.
Yep. And so those are just really great fuel for muscles and for the brain. And so people were using that. And I started thinking about dark chocolate and the antioxidant capacity, and then start thinking about lion's mane and psilocybin and all these different medicinal mushrooms, which all have been shown to upregulate neurogenesis, or literally the formation of new brain cells, which up until a couple decades ago.
Now I'm thinking I should have been taking the chocolate cupcakes.
Up until a couple of decades ago, most doctors and scientists thought was impossible. They thought you had a certain amount of brain cells and that's it, which is just ludicrous. And one more example of how off track modern science and medicine have become.
So
and
where we can go with it. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Nope.
Okay. And I did just take a dose. Would it be wrong if I had one of these as well right now?
Should we take a bite?
Given
Slow
your given your other reaction to these medicines,
right,
you might need to go run through the woods for an hour, which could be great, right? It could be great, but I would not suspect you'd be able to sit calmly at a desk, at least for the first maybe hour or so.
So Brian, could we in fact then actually just eat this all at once, because I mean, even when it is a 2-bite brownie, we just pop it in our mouth, right?
Yeah,
right,
you don't take 2 bites.
No, I don't think anyone ever does.
Come on, who does
right.
that?
So you just
totally ridiculous.
So you could just pop it in your mouth, and then find a forest, and you'll be everything's fine. But it's not going to be a very altering experience. That's why I've stayed away from it this week. I'm like,
you don't want to go too far.
I had a couple gigs. I didn't know what was going to go on, so I'm like, so it's just it's just
for the most part, it's very chill for most people. The people I know who are most sensitive, who are Reiki teachers and yoga people and very petite little women, they'll have half or a quarter, but that's like I said, the hyper responder. The average person, a full one is totally fine. You're gonna feel
the junkies over here are fine. yeah, right. So the added cacao.
Yeah,
is not going to.
It's the full integration of all that stuff.
So the fact that it looks like a big edible, that's deceiving. It's not.
And we're not talking about super potent cannabis.
Exactly.
Extracts, right?
Right.
That's a whole different ballgame.
Isn't that really what I had the whole mindset of that this whole time? The first experiment, this experiment is I'm microdosing some kind of some substance like cannabis. Ooh, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
It's no, Susan. This is this
you
is
actually
a type of mushroom. Chill out. It's not really gonna.
You actually thought you took ginseng the first time.
Okay, let me tell you about that. The whole time I really did think I was just taking concentrated ginseng.
Right.
So I'm of course nothing's happening. So not only was I completely ruining the experiment by consuming vast amounts of alcohol,
right,
I also was under the impression that I was taking fucking ginseng.
Yeah, but your memory would be great.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So sharp, Susan. So sharp. Oh, anyway,
Which,
Brian.
I mean, if we were trying to do a blinded study, then that'd be a good idea, right?
Yeah.
You were convinced it was something else.
This is a little embarrassing, but
it's interesting because one of my first one of my first experiences was with something called a Scooby snack, which is a combination of psilocybin and ginseng and ginkgo biloba and a few other herbs like that. And I mean, they're fantastic.
Yeah, I
And
need
you know,
those.
yeah, they're very, very effective at sort of, raising the vibration and raising your energy and getting you more in tune. They're good for like concerts and social things like that.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I thought
Oh, it,
ginkgo biloba was memory.
yeah, so ginkgo biloba is definitely great for the brain, and why they include it, why I think they include it in those kind of formulations, is because it helps to increase circulation in the brain. So you're going
Okay.
to get better absorption and better sort of distribution of the therapeutic agents.
I see. Okay. Now, before I forget, um, when I met you, and then I want you to tell your story about how you became an integrated wellness, all these things, holistic
Mm.
biohacker, everything. So we were up at someone's cottage, and I first heard you speak. You were like in the kitchen or something, and I heard you, and I pictured like an older gentleman, like someone like middle aged, just
Mm.
because your voice has like some sort of like gravitas or like groundedness to it, right?
I love your voice, Brian.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, and then I saw you and I was like, oh, who's the young guy? You know? So right away I was totally intrigued by like, what's the deal here? And shortly after that, I think it was the same day, we all went for a hike, as we do up at the cottage up there. We went for a hike and you kind of stayed back. I think all of us ended up sort of trickling back into the cottage, and you were the last to arrive after the hike. And you came back with like an armload of mushrooms and bark, and like it was
Yeah.
like Grizzly Adams, but for the like, you know what I mean? Like for mushrooms. I don't know. Grizzly Adams, that's probably not the right reference.
It's well, you're like there's the hunters and then
The
Brian's
gatherers.
the gatherers.
Yeah. But what it is, even more so, is that you could identify. Like if I went for a walk in the forest and I started picking mushrooms and bark and berries and stuff, I'd
back
be
with
coming
poison
back
ivy.
with poison,
Yeah.
right? But you came back with edible stuff. Like, right, you made tea, you used those mushrooms like for us to consume. And I after that I was like, wow, this guy's amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, after years of learning about this stuff and going for walks with people with much more experience and knowledge in myself, it becomes quite easy, right? And you really start to look at nature as a collection of friends.
Yeah, but see,
Right,
that
like-
would blow a lot of people's minds. And I'm pretty connected to nature, but I can imagine people who, you know, are deprived of that would think it's crazy.
Yeah, which is exactly really indicative of how actually crazy our current society is.
Yeah.
Right? Because our ancestors would have all been able to identify hundreds or thousands of edible and
Yep.
medicinal plants and mushrooms and, animals and so forth. So it's really just getting more in touch with our ancestral knowledge.
Ah, what a good
and
point.
what's allowed humans to thrive on the planet for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think those were some Ganoderma mushrooms, which are related to reishi, which
Okay.
are quite distinct. They're quite distinct in their appearance and very easy to identify, and very, there's no toxic lookalikes.
Uh-huh.
Because there are definitely some mushrooms, like I've got some drying outside right now that I picked yesterday or 2 days ago that I don't know what they are. But
How do you find out?
Yeah.
well, it's tricky. So there's great Facebook groups where people, you can post pictures and things and describe things, and people will chime in with their opinions.
Yeah, but somebody still had to try it to know.
Yeah. Well, there's very few, and this is true of plants as well. There's very few plants and mushrooms that eating a tiny, tiny bit will actually like hurt you or kill you.
Okay.
You'd have to eat a lot of something that's toxic for it to really mess you up. And the
Mhm.
worst you're probably going to get is diarrhea or vomiting.
Right.
And
And hey, what's a little?
yeah, like you're going to have a bit of a
Diarrhea.
rough
That's
time.
that's called weight loss. So send them our way, Brian. It's either going to kill us or make us skinny. And you know what? After 2020, I'm up for both. I'm up for both.
Oh my God, that's great.
Ah.
What is reishi? Exactly.
Reishi, yeah. So Ganoderma lucidium is the most common. That's the Latin name. That's the most common form that you'll find in supplements and teas and superfood concoctions, and they call it the king of the mushrooms in Chinese medicine, and it's been studied for thousands of years in Chinese medicine, and I mean, it's shown to pretty much beneficially impact every system of the body,
Wow.
whether it's the liver, whether it's the heart, whether it is the adrenals and the kidneys and the stress response. So beneficial when we're consuming that on the regular. Um, and it also is known for, I believe they call it a Shen tonic. And I'm no student of Chinese medicine. I know very little about Chinese medicine, but I know enough that Shen is what they call spiritual essence.
Ooh.
And so reishi helps to build your spiritual essence, which is why it's very good for sleep and for meditation and those kind of things.
What is that powder that they snort in Brazil? Rape?
Oh yes. I mean RAPE. So
Yeah,
hape.
it's a tough one. Hape. That's it.
Yeah, that's like a tobacco.
You don't want to. You don't want to like. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've not worked with that much at all. I've only had it administered on myself a couple times, and yeah, very different kind of experience. I don't think there's anything mushroom based.
No, there's nothing to that. It's just a jolt to the brain.
I think it's mostly tobacco
Okay.
and other plants. Yeah.
All right. So that was a bit off topic. What's good for the lymph?
Oh, geez, that's a big question. I mean, fundamentally, the only things that move lymph are human movement, right? So actually, physical movement. You can take herbs and you can take different concoctions that can help support the lymph. But the best thing, I mean, and this is why rebounding is quite popular. Bouncing on those little trampolines.
Well, we're familiar
Oh,
with rebounding.
We were thinking something else about rebounding.
Yeah, so that's one of the best ways to move lymph. Cycling, biking, dancing.
Not a cold plunge? Does that help?
See, I believe it does, but it might not to the extent that we think it does.
Okay.
It's great for circulation of blood, right? Because all the blood rushes from the extremities to the core. So it's great in that sense. And people think that with that change in temperature, it can help move lymph, and also the pressure of the water on the body
I see.
will do something. But massage would be far more effective
Okay.
at moving the lymph, and pretty much pushing towards the heart is the general rule of thumb.
Okay. Either that or a real lit dance floor. Let's go.
Oh, remember those?
Remember those?
Now, Brian, I find healers find their purpose because at one point they actually need to do the healing, that they now offer. Did your path to this begin with health struggles?
Yeah. So at the time, it was not a fun or enjoyable or easy experience, but now it's really been the greatest gift that I've ever received. And that was to have my appendix rupture when I was 18 years old.
That's so scary.
And yeah.
But that didn't happen. I mean, what I recall you telling me was that you first went to emergency at like 3 a.m. and the doctor basically, this old guy said, "Here's a couple Tylenol, go home."
Yeah, no,
accurate?
It was worse than that. He gave me 2 shots of morphine and a prescription of Tylenol 3s with codeine, and I took 2 of those. So I had massive amounts of narcotic painkillers in my system.
Oh my God, that should be like, that's not even, I don't even understand.
Yeah. He told me I had the flu after his
and so here's some
examination.
morphine?
Yeah, it was messed up.
That's
Totally
malpractice.
Yeah.
We
won't name
looked into a lawsuit potential at some point,
yeah.
but then we're not, myself and my mom are not the kind of people to go after people like that. And really, it was all perfect because it enabled me to then further down the line. Because, I went to the first hospital, they misdiagnosed me, went to another hospital the next day, and they found what was going on. They opened me up, they did emergency surgery, cleaned me up as best they could. But because it had ruptured and festered for a while, I had a lot of infection. And so it was not a straightforward sort of, zip him up and he heals. It was zip him up and, the wound took many months to heal, which was a very interesting experience. Being able to look down and literally see the stitches holding my abs together.
Whoa.
Yeah, very trippy. Very trippy.
And before you go on, I don't want to, this is just, what were you planning on going into in your life? What were you going to school for? What was your projected future?
Yeah, that was automotive engineering technology.
Right.
So completely different, completely very heady, very science-based,
Yeah.
and, very not embodied,
No.
which I
And
realized,
because of this experience, you then found your calling.
yeah, because when you lose something, you recognize its value, right? And it's like the void creates the value, and that's something
Mm-hmm.
that Dr. John DeMartini teaches. And
Does that have anything to do with the drink?
no,
No. Okay. Never
no,
mind.
no, no, no. Just a fascinating, genius individual.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's better.
but
That's better.
so there I am, 18, 19 years old and feeling completely run down. I had lost a ton of weight. I was in the hospital for 11 days after that process on mostly
Jeez.
liquids. So
Yeah.
I went in at about 170 pounds and came out at about 145 pounds
With a zipped up abdomen.
with a zipped up abdomen
Oh, wow.
that had two open holes because it couldn't heal properly because of infection. So I had the pleasure of packing my own wounds for the next,
my
couple months.
Getting
But
to
I mean,
know you.
I've
Yeah.
I've always been rather comfortable with these kinds of things, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Um, but it left me in a state where, because I had taken so many antibiotics to stay alive,
Right.
I was pretty much like sterile after that, and I didn't understand anything about probiotics or gut health or prebiotics. So I went back to drinking beer and eating pizza and being a university student.
Wow.
And that quickly caught up with me about a year after all this, when I felt like I should be recovered by now. My gut was so out of whack that I was bloated all the time. I was depressed. I was fatigued. I was not a happy camper. And that's when I realized that I'd seriously created a massive imbalance of yeast and bacteria in my stomach and my gut that was contributing to all of the ongoing health challenges. So yeah, I became endlessly fascinated with figuring out what was going on and how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a few years, and it took the help of a naturopathic doctor and different books and different podcasts. But I was able to get myself back to a place of feeling more like myself. And I mean, I still have things to this day that I have to do as preventative maintenance, mostly to make sure that the scar tissue in my gut doesn't cause constriction.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've also experienced small bowel obstruction,
Mm-hmm.
which mostly is common in women who have had C-sections, because the scarring creates adhesions to the small bowel, and then things get stuck and don't flow properly,
Mm-hmm.
which is all treatable and preventable with massage.
Okay.
So that's the good news.
Keeping things
And
moving.
for any surgery, right? We can treat and break down the excess scar tissue with massage.
Right.
And so that was my journey, was figuring out how to heal the gut and the digestive system, and how to deal with scar tissue and the complications of that. Gave me a very in-depth first-hand experience of how to unwind these things and get back to a place of vitality and energetic existence, because I was not feeling very energetic for a lot of those years.
Right. And finding the gift in the tragedy, and then, going on to continue to help people through what you've learned, I think is fantastic. Do you, what's your opinion on so many people having IBS or some sort of digestion problems, and the whole gluten conversation? Where do you stand with all of that with your food knowledge?
Yeah, I think the gluten issue is mostly two things. It's mostly what's sprayed on
Yeah.
food, right? So things like glyphosate, which we know poke holes in our gut lining,
Mm-hmm.
and which we know are actually, and this is again, I don't want anything I say to instill fear in people and for people to cower away from life.
We're just
'Cause
talking here.
It's easy to do that, but there's literally glyphosate in rainwater.
Oops, sorry. That's whoa.
That's just Walter.
Okay, Walter, come here.
That's just Vanson's dog, Walter.
Can't get around your chair.
But is that like with the holes, Brian? Is that what we call then leaky gut? So many people are talking
Yes.
about leaky gut, and I'm like, how the hell does a gut leak? What's it leaking? Like, Do you need to wear? Depends. What's going on? I'm just fascinated about how much we're now focused on our gut health. And
I think there's
and the
nothing
leaking.
worse than calling something leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah, I do. I kind of cringe when I hear someone talking
But you know
about
what? It's
their
probably
gut
right on the
leaking.
nose. Like there's so many of these technical terms, but then you just hear leaky gut. And
Now
like,
you're interested.
Oh.
Right. Anyway,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a-
And so, because the things that are sprayed on a lot of what's in the food supply contribute to that, the scientific term is intestinal permeability, because a lot of doctors will not give you any time of day if you say you think you have leaky gut. They'll laugh at you and they'll say that's not a thing, right? But intestinal permeability is very well studied. And so, because the gut lining, the lining of the intestines is only one cell wall thick, it's very easy to damage. It's also quite easy to regenerate because it turns over so quickly, which is why someone who's got terrible, terrible gut issues, and I've had clients like this in the past, if I put them on a bone broth fast for 3 days, they can completely turn around their gut health.
oh, okay.
And that's
Wow.
because things like collagen and gelatin can support that lining.
Will that
But the
also
gluten-
help my wrinkles, my elasticity of my skin? Will that somehow?
Potentially.
Right.
Okay, I'm
although-
glad we're on this point. I want to hear from you, Brian. If you consume collagen, is that effective? People are
Yeah,
saying
like the bovine or the marine. If you have that every morning in your smoothie,
like, does that
are
actually?
we wasting our money?
I know that's. I've got a big thing of it.
Me too.
Above my stove. I don't know.
It's not wasting your money because it's still going to contribute to your daily protein needs, and it's going
Okay.
to provide a lot of good amino acids that your body's going to use for
Amino
essential
acids.
functions.
That's good. I like that. That sounds great.
Okay.
Right? The direct connection between, okay, I'm going to drink some broth and it's going to, go directly to my skin is not necessarily
Come on, Brian.
founded. Not necessarily founded, although
Okay.
something
Got an
even
although.
simpler, which requires no ingestion of anything, does improve skin collagen, and that's red light. So you can get a red light device or build one yourself and literally use that on your face, on wherever, and completely youthify your skin. Just
You
with
mean
light.
like a red light bulb?
Like a specific red light
Okay.
bulb.
Okay.
Yeah, a specific.
Where would I
wavelength
like
and
Home
a
Depot?
You got your
specific
Christmas
power.
tree up
No,
tomorrow.
I'm writing my Christmas list like right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've built a basic system like this with they call them R40 heat lamps. They're the kind of lamps you use to keep chickens warm
Is that
and to
why you
keep
look so
food
young?
warm.
Okay.
And to keep
Oh,
food warm.
like when stuff goes up on the at the
Yep.
restaurant.
The
when
buffet.
when
When
Yep.
they're
Okay,
Yep.
so do you make these and sell these? How do I get my hands on one?
I have. I would recommend you a better specific for this purpose kind of device. There's a lot out there, but the one that I think is probably the highest quality, which is unfortunate that the website and the actual business around it is not the most easy to navigate.
Okay.
But the device itself is fantastic. That's called a Rejuvenator.
Rejuvenator. Oh
Are
my
you
God,
writing this
Brian.
down?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Ladies, if you're tuning in today,
I know-
you're going to be glad you did.
Okay, Brian, I know our health is really important, but this is the most
Our
exciting
skin's
thing.
more important.
Brian, are you a vegan?
No, definitely
No.
not.
Oh.
Def-
oh,
definitely
wow.
He's not.
Oh, you're
I
not a
am
vegan.
I am not a fan of
Not a
strict
fan.
strict veganism. It can be great for a cleanse, and if you live in the tropics, it can be more practical. But for North Americans, it is. I've not seen many people do it long term successfully and do it well and thrive. I think that there are certain things in animal foods that you cannot get other places, and it just doesn't make sense
Oh,
to
wow.
be dogmatically against something. I'm not for that at all.
I have a friend
am-
with Crohn's disease,
Mhm.
and she is like full vegan, and has been for a very long time. But I wonder if she, understands exactly what she needs. I mean, she's
If she
very
were-
well educated with it, but
If she were to go on a bone broth fast for like 3 or 4 days, she would probably feel better than she has maybe ever.
wow.
And that's just because bone broth is so nourishing to the gut lining.
I'm just
and
picturing
often-
myself with this like red light on me in a bit of a lounge chair
Drinking
with
bone
a
broth.
bowl of bone broth and a straw. and that's it.
Yeah.
And a couple scoops of collagen just in case.
Just in case.
It's a beautiful sight.
I know.
It's
It's
a
like,
beautiful sight.
Yeah.
it's just interesting. Like what happened to dairy? Like, why is it the devil now? Like, everyone's all anti-dairy.
Like, I'm lactose
Brian.
free milk. I love lactose free milk, but it's not because it's lactose free. I've discovered it's sweeter than regular milk, and that's probably why I enjoy
know.
drinking it. And I am actually a milk drinker. Like, I'll pour myself a glass of milk sometimes.
Are you serious?
Isn't that weird?
Oh, I haven't done that since I was a kid.
I know. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
Interesting thing about the lactose
happened
free
to
milk,
dairy?
because my first ever sort of awareness around nutrition came from that, because I was lactose intolerant.
Okay.
So I began taking the lactase enzymes, which break down lactose into its simpler sugars, and then went about my day, because I was hooked on pizza and ice cream as a kid. Those were like two of my major food groups, which is probably why I was so sick by the time I was 18.
Right.
But yeah, the dairy thing is tricky. If you're getting whole, unpasteurized dairy, that's always the ideal for most people, because then it's got the enzymes and the natural bacteria that allow you to break it down and utilize it. It's a live food. And raw goat's kefir was instrumental in my own healing. I used to have literally a Russian doctor who moved to Canada and became a goat farmer, used to meet us in the parking lot to sell his goat products.
Whoa.
He got shut down by Health Canada, unfortunately, as many of these people do. But his raw goat kefir was instrumental in my gut coming back to function.
I'm just going to
And,
put that on the side of my bone broth over there. It's just over on the side table beside my lounge chair.
Yeah, you'd have a shot of raw goat milk. And
Yeah.
I know I met some friends in Florida in February of this year who were recovering vegans. And they were drinking raw goat's milk as what part of their recovery.
It's because they love themselves again. Brian,
Yeah.
Brian, like, really, I like how anorexia is now called intermittent fasting. What is your take on this new practice of starvation? Are you you're for it?
Very, very contextual. I
Yeah.
was definitely for it for a while, and I definitely did some harm to myself by being too rigid with it.
Okay.
Because I'm also a very fast metabolizer, lean individual.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to need more consistent fuel, especially if I'm exercising or working out or under stress. And that's the real key to look at here, is that if you're living in the middle of the country and you're farming or doing some low stress activity, you're going to have much more tolerance to something like intermittent fasting, because fasting is in itself a stress. And so we have to balance our stress load and know when we're putting ourselves too far into stress, and know when it's actually beneficial. So, going 12 hours overnight, say like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. as a good window is a great place to start, and a great place where most people will be able to do that indefinitely.
Yeah.
They're going to be better off for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my personal sort of practice. On the off day, or sometimes I'll just feel similar to yourself, like not eating, in which case I might have just some clear liquids, or a little bit of coconut water and tea or something like that. Just keep it light, but still put a little bit of support in the form of minerals into the system. But it's very dependent, and you'll see because a lot of people are carrying around a lot of stored energy in the form of body fat. Fasting and intermittent fasting can retrain the body to tap into that.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of people have that experience, and then they're preaching the gospel, and they think everyone needs to do it.
I know
But-
they're like the vegans, Brian. They're very, they convert. Let's just say that they want everybody to starve themselves. I don't know. Like, for someone who
Yeah.
works out, does weight training, I'm just not convinced that we need to be doing that on fumes. Like, my brother doesn't eat for like a whole day. Like, he skips days.
I just
I'm
do
thinking,
things that make me feel good.
Okay,
Yeah.
but if you're working out, I think you need a little fuel.
Oh, you
anyway,
definitely need fuel.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was interesting
Body-
to hear what you thought about it.
No, and the body can definitely store fuel for a while. The liver and the muscles can store glycogen,
Yeah.
which is just a storage form of sugar. So that's definitely a thing. And so as long as you're replenishing your protein and your carbs and your healthy fats throughout the course of like a day, most people are going to be fine. Now, men hormonally tend to do better. So that's just a biological thing,
Way to go,
right?
guys.
Just
So,
another
and
Way
that's,
to go.
another point on the board.
you'll see women and pro athletes that are women who specifically do this to stop their periods because they don't want their periods interfering with their training and their performance.
Well, let's not
But if you're
go
stop
overboard.
exactly, because if you're stopping your period, that's not a good sign,
No,
right?
you're stopping a
That's your,
whole lot of other things too.
and that's your body saying you are not healthy enough
Right.
and low stress enough to be fertile,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a big signal that people need to understand. So yeah, I'm you know I'm not a huge proponent of it just because most people already have enough stress as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
adding
hallelujah.
more to that is not going to help. And if we can just very quickly, I want to go back and tie a bow end on the gluten thing because I think we kind of left people hanging a bit there. And that's just to say that the spraying of those chemicals on the grains and the overconsumption of grain-based products combined with the hybridization of
Yes.
certain grains
I'm
to
glad
produce
you did that.
more gluten,
Yeah.
right? Because if you go to Europe and Italy, a lot of
Hello.
people
Yeah, you
can
say that.
digest Italian flour and pasta and pizza very well. And so it's not just the gluten, it's a bigger picture. Yeah, and intestinal inflammation is really what we're talking about here, right? It's people having inflammation in their guts. And there's a lot of things that can contribute to that. And this is one of the biggest, I would say. And so a lot of people, if they've never eliminated anything from their diets, they can do well to pull back for like 2 weeks to a month at a minimum and just eliminate any pasteurized dairy and any gluten containing grains.
I buy Italian flour, Italian pasta, everything. Like now living here, I got to pay a lot for it.
Are you going to Italy?
But that's what, but that's what I do. I seek out.
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah.
Why are we
European flour.
injecting? Like, why can't we be like the Europeans? Like, why are we doing
Standards are
this?
different.
Yeah, I mean it's big business, right?
Right, yeah,
Agribusiness
yeah.
is big business, and
The
Canada
question
grows,
left my mouth, and I'm like, I know it's business.
yeah, Canada grows unfortunately more GMO crops than most countries in the world.
Yep.
GMO soy and canola are abundant in Canada.
Yeah.
Hopefully that shifts to not be the case over the next coming decades. But that's the current state, and that's why it's really important to avoid things that have those processed ingredients in them because they do contribute to inflammation and can cause a lot of health issues. And there are enzymes, specific enzymes to help actually break down the gluten protein. So you can get those, and what I'll do is travel with those. And if I'm going to have, some bread at a restaurant, or I'm going to a friend's place, and I know they're going to have some sort of traditional dish that I want to enjoy, I'll just carry enzymes with me.
Like gluten-ease or those things, like those things that you can just buy like over the counter.
Yeah, they're pretty much any health food store is going to have them.
Okay.
I'm really liking the stuff, and this is true of not just gluten enzymes, but enzymes in general. There's a company that I really enjoy called Optimizers, and they have a product called Gluten Guardian,
Okay.
which is a very potent form of gluten digesting enzyme. So I'll just take those, and I find that limits any sort of brain fog or heaviness or like the next day hangover effect I might have. That really helps with that. So it's just about, again, having the tools and knowing when to use them so that you can enjoy your life to the maximum, right? But not suffer the consequences.
It's so important.
It's huge.
It's everything.
Huge. It's totally. And that's why entire cultures and, are built around food and are built around the preservation and the cultivation of fresh, organic, clean foods, right? And that's where people tend to live the longest is in places where that's normal and natural and practiced by everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. And it's great to see the, just health consciousness in general has expanded massively.
Yeah.
And it will continue to expand to the degree that people don't have health, right? And they're suffering.
Exactly. And also that people thought that I was gluten-free because I wanted to lose weight. Like a lot of these dietary changes we make when we want to be more conscious about what we put in our bodies, how people sort of make these ego assumptions or these assumptions that we're trying to do something that's more about how we look rather than how we feel.
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate. And that's a lot of the disservice of the nutrition and fitness industry, right? Is that most people's baseline relationship to food or the word diet is always in relation to losing weight.
Yeah.
When I always tell people that, your body will balance itself out when you give it what it needs. but don't have weight loss as a goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have that be a nice side effect of getting healthy.
Yep.
And for some people, they're going to gain weight at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they might have been in a really restrictive pattern and their hormones are all out of whack. So they need to actually gain weight for a while and come back to baseline. And then maybe they'll slowly let go of that.
And unfortunately, some of those people give up because they're like, oh, I'm gaining weight. Or if you haven't engaged in exercise and then you do, you gain weight because you're gaining muscle, which weighs more than fat. So, not to be discouraged when you're making those changes.
Totally. It's like we gotta give ourselves a bit of a break, really, to not have some crazy, unrealistic expectation of what we're supposed to look like.
Right.
And recognize that, all the people on the cover magazines and the models and the Instagrammers, many of them are really suffering to look that way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing that because they get paid to do that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a completely unnecessary, burden to carry that does nothing but weigh us down and really, mess us up. It just messes us up mentally and physically.
Do you worry about people and the future and where things are going?
That's a really loaded question.
Yeah.
I am pretty much endlessly optimistic. And, similar to yourself, we're pioneering, in a direction, being ahead of the curve on those things that you mentioned, and myself being ahead of the curve on other things. I think, and this might sound crazy to a lot of people, but I think this year is demonstrating it more than ever. I think that in the not too distant future, we will have two distinct populations of humans. One who has retained their natural vitality and their natural fertility and their connection to real foods and the land, which is where I'm going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
one which has become completely dependent on pharmaceuticals and drugs and fertility medications and just more and more system synthetic technocracy control nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a way for a human to live.
Right.
And I recognize that the current state of the world seems like there's a lot of people who are they're happy to take that route. They
Right.
want to take that route, and that's all the power to them. And so I know that there will continue to be healthy humans and, communities of healthy humans and, global networks so that we can communicate and interface and exchange value with each other on. I have no doubt that that's going to be the case. And that in fact, a lot of that is currently and will continue to expand at a huge rate as more and more people wake up and tune into this and choose that for themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful. And I recognize that particularly the younger generations these days are fighting a massive uphill battle.
Yeah.
And are just loaded with fear and loaded with this sterilization culture and wash your hands 10 times a day and, don't touch your friends and don't play in the dirt and all that stuff, which is the exact opposite of what healthy humans need.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of all that. And, I don't let it stress me out. I don't let it get me down. I just recognize that, there's something much bigger than me that's in control and that I can trust in the flow of things. And that I can, trust that if I show up and do my piece, that's all I can do.
Yeah.
And if people resonate, then fantastic. If they don't, fantastic. So yeah, I'm hopeful. And I also know that, the process of transformation, and the world is undergoing a massive transformation. The process of transformation is usually ugly and hard and bloody oftentimes, and just not, it's not pretty. It's not pretty, but it's necessary.
Yeah,
And
waking up
it's
is
all-
hard to do, as they say. Yeah,
Definitely.
I think you're quite right when you say that. Like we're just kind of in the muckety muck of raising our consciousness and
Yeah.
vibrating at a higher level.
Yeah.
I think so. I think we're just in the
Totally.
shits right now, but I'm optimistic like you too, Brian. I do believe that we are headed towards something,
And
far better.
And we should all be tuning into your podcast at night.
Oh yeah.
So you can put us to sleep with your wonderful voice.
I know. Can I call you around 10:30? Because I go to bed a bit early. Can we just talk for a few minutes, Brian? Because I love how soothing your voice is. And so intermittent fasting, eh?
Yeah.
You're
No more stress. Well, listen, Brian, holistic nutritionist, biohacker, and integrative health coach. This has been one jam-packed episode of information and great knowledge.
Yeah, amazing.
And
Thank
everyone
you.
should tune into your podcast,
Yes,
Redefining Reality.
Just to listen to your voice.
Yeah.
But no, your voice and your knowledge.
And I'd love to
Amazing.
actually talk to you more. Maybe at some point we can do this again, maybe about menopause or women at a certain age that some of our listeners might really appreciate. If you can sort of fill us in on what you know in that regard.
Yeah, there's so much more we
In
could
the
talk about,
future.
like bloating.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about the bloating.
Let's talk about
but
that.
we could. God knows. But yeah, we're running out of time. So
For now, we have to eat our little fudge cupcake.
I know. I can't wait to eat the fudge cup. We're going to eat the fudge cup now. God, that sounds weird. That doesn't sound good.
No, it's food.
It is food. It just sounds weird.
It does.
But anyway,
Yeah.
thank you
But
very
this
much.
has been great. Thank you guys for having me on. And yeah, if people want to follow Redefining Reality, you can find it anywhere that podcasts are hosted. And Instagram is the best place to reach me if people want to connect. That's at Brian with a Y Hardy 7. And yeah, I mean, I love to share. I love to support people. I love to expand my knowledge and help people to recognize really what we're up against in the modern world and how to sustainably mitigate that stress. So if people are interested, reach out. I'm here. And
yeah, you've given
happy
us
to connect.
a great taste of that today. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
My
Brian.
pleasure. Okay. All the best, guys.
You too.
Thanks.
Well, Susan, that's all the time we have for
I
today.
know it's been a lot, but we thank our listeners for tuning in. We hope that they enjoyed all that information and, of course, the soothing sounds of Brian
Brian's
Hardy.
voice. Yeah.
It was good to see you.
And good to see you, Susan Stewart.
Yeah. Until next time, you're Kelly Fanson.
And you're...
Remember me? Well, you just said my name, so now it's weird. But you can say it again. It's fine.
It's all messy again.
Whatever.
It's perfect.
It's good.
Because why?
We're
still a hot mess. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Purple Jade Wellness Center, for your support. Thanks also to Monkey Junk, the Juno Award-winning blues band consisting of some of the best people and musicians we know. We'd also like to thank and give a 3-minute hug, because self-help says that's more meaningful, to the Pod Plant and Mike Wixon.
And hey, why not subscribe or follow our show? And please, for the love of Oprah, give us a rating and review on your iPhone podcast app. And if you're into social media, you can find us on Instagram at Still a Hot Mess Podcast and like us on Facebook at Still a Hot Mess. And thank you, Fanson.
And thank you, Susan.
You make a mess of me. You make